and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer, really, standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes, and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, everyone. This is Martin Willis, your host, and we're coming at you live on the Dark Matter Radio Network, like every Wednesday at 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're coming at you live for 2 hours, starting last week. Before we get into the details about the changes, Alejandro Rojas from Open Minds is going to be sitting in and talking about UFO events in a minute. And he will be joined by a special guest a little later on, journalist Leslie Kean, to talk about her experience recently at the UFO discussion panel at American University. Then, basically at the half hour, A.J. Gervais, a noted ufologist from Brazil, will be talking to us for an hour and a half or so. Well, after I announced that future podcasts would be 2 hours long last week, and that the second hour would be by subscription only, I received quite a few emails. Basically, people telling me to go, you know what, myself. And I have to admit I was taken by surprise, given that everyone will still be getting the usual hour free show. I look at it this way. I'm not taking away anything. I'm just offering more, another hour. That's all I'm doing. I was also surprised by the number of people telling me that at $5 a month, a little over $1 per podcast, was way too expensive. Well, for as long as I've run this podcast, I have done so at my own expense. And I don't make any money at this. As a matter of fact, since the show has grown so much, I am out of pocket each and every month. Unlike many other podcasts, I'm not a paid employee, nor do I have any sponsors. A number of things that are out of pocket as well that I'd like to bring you is a live show from the UFO Congress in Arizona this coming February. I would also like to pay to have the shows transcribed like I used to. That was very helpful to a lot of people. And, of course, I'd like to pay for fresh blogs on our website. So if you feel paying a fee for the second half of the show is not something you care to do, I understand. If charging a fee makes you no longer a fan of the show, I will understand as well. And we're sorry to lose you, but in truth, I'm just trying to make this a better show. And thank you for understanding. We really do appreciate each and every one of you. So let me give the details one more time. You can listen free right here on the Dark Matter Radio Network every Wednesday at 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But only the first hour will be made into a free podcast on Podcast UFO and iTunes, Stitcher, all that. New subscribers or people who have been subscribing or donating in the past will be able to access the second hour as a podcast on a platform called getjoyride.com. That's GetJoyride.com. And that is starting December 1st. Anyone that would like to donate now on podcastufo.com to get the second part of the show, I will certainly put you on the mailing list and you will get them. All right, that's enough of that. Now we're ready to talk to Alejandro. How are you this week, Alejandro?
I am doing good. How are you?
Great. And we're freezing up here. You know that up here on the mountain, I had an ice storm a couple of days ago.
Really?
Yeah, I took some great pictures, and everything was just frozen, like every grass blade and every twig.
Oh my God!
Big, thick gob of ice on it. Now there's snow on the ground, and I sound like, a mountain man or something, but I drive down the bottom of the mountain from where I live, and there's no snow. So
good.
I know. At least I can escape for a little while.
Yeah, I'm picturing you with, like, icicle beards. and all this snow, kind of a Santa Claus kind of thing is what I'm
sort of
picturing.
staring out the window looking for a UFO that never shows.
Yeah.
On my lonely mountain.
It's gotten chilly around here, too. I had to wear a jacket yesterday. I might need to put one on this evening because it's the cold time of year here in Phoenix. Temperatures have dipped down into the highs are as low as 71 degrees.
Jeez, I'm really feeling for you, man.
Yeah. But I'm doing what I can. Day by day is what you got to do.
That's right. So what do we have going on for news this week?
Okay, first we'll start off, because this is really cool, and there's a lot of background I'd like to share with your listeners, because I'm sure they would love it. But we got to get through this quick before Leslie comes on, because this is the American University Talk, which Leslie Kean, of course, is going to talk about. However, this is a part that she said she didn't have anything to do with, and so she doesn't know much about it, nor does she seem to be particularly interested at this point, and I understand why. And essentially what had happened is the Roswell researcher, Tom Carey. Now, I was really excited when I saw him on the list of speakers because I think he's a very credible researcher. I'm a big fan of him and his research partner, Don Schmidt. However, surprisingly, at this event, he came out and said, I have the smoking gun. I have pictures of an alien. But he said, sorry, I don't have them with me. I'm going to have to show those to you later.
Now, when I first heard that, I'm thinking, but now, I totally understand. Why would you want to show something up where all of a sudden people can grab, images of it and it be posted, blasted all over the place, especially if this is and I hate to say it, but it could be some type of cash cow here too.
Well, and I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because of who he is and the research they've done. He says, these films these pictures were found with some other pictures with this couple who I guess took the pictures or may have taken the pictures, knew Eisenhower because they were in pictures with Eisenhower. So it looks interesting. Like I said, Leslie said, well, didn't have anything to do with that because, it doesn't necessarily make the field look good, though. I think that the mainstream kind of views ufology in this manner. We're all a bunch of guys here saying, there's some great stuff here, UFOs are real, the evidence is there, and when they say, okay, where is it? Oh, well, I can't show it to you, or the government's got it, or they're hiding it, or look at this smudgy picture of a UFO. So it doesn't, I don't think, in this environment serve our field well, especially when Leslie and Richard Haynes and the others Charles Hott have such incredibly credible and interesting information to share in this field. So I could see how she would be frustrated. Some of the background I wanted to share is that these pictures actually made a whole ruckus a year ago when some information was leaked that Tom and Don were working on this. Mm-hmm. And Tom and Don have not said one thing. This is the first time they've even discussed these pictures.
I'd like to correct you on that. I had both of them on since that time, and I can't remember which one it was, either Don or Tom. But we did talk about it, and he didn't want to elaborate much on it, whoever the person was I was speaking to.
I guess that's what I mean, is that they have been very tight-lipped and said very little. Mm-hmm. A lot of alleged facts about the pictures came out about a year ago, things such as that it was discovered by a cleaning lady who was cleaning stuff up at an estate sale. Right. That the pictures show an alien that appears to have been, and I think that Tom said this at the university, American University, that it looks like its insides had been taken out and it had undergone some sort of autopsy. So, so it's interesting. I just... it's hard. I can imagine why people would be skeptical, and of course I can't help but be skeptical because every time something like this comes along, the smoking guns seem to be smoking cap guns or water guns, or like the Martian
Pop guns. Yeah.
Marvin the Martian gun, where it's just wah, wah, so it's a bit worrisome. But this has made a lot of news, and there's a lot of criticism of the way Tom Carey went about this, but there's also some people who are excited to and hopeful. That
now,
something good.
We have to connect to Leslie here in just a second, but
I didn't say anything.
I also want to say
talked about never happened.
Yeah, I also want to say that didn't he claim also at this panel that he did get these authenticated to be 1947?
There were rumors were saying that some television show had gotten them authenticated by Kodak. But according to the rumors from a year ago, and I want to say these are rumors, we don't know the exact facts yet. The rumors said that they authenticated them something between 1945 and 1962. That there was a window there, but
they were using that type of film. But all right, we're ready. Yeah. Leslie is waiting for us now, so here we go. We're going to connect to her, and always enjoy speaking to her.
Oh, yes.
And Leslie.
Hi, Martin, Alejandro, how are you guys?
Good.
Thanks for joining us. And let's talk about what went on. Was it last week?
Oh, gosh, I've lost all sense of time. I think it was last week. It was last week. Yes, last Wednesday.
Yeah. So let's hear about it.
Well, it was a fantastic day. We had this first. We started with this lunch. I mean, I guess everybody knows that who was involved, and that it was at American University, which is a very important university in Washington. They have, Obama has spoken there in the last year. It's very plugged in to the political scene. And so it was just very impressive that they went all out to host us because of the topic. And most universities don't do that. And what we did was started with a luncheon there, which involved the students from the honors class that Professor John Weisskopf teaches. And it was because of his class that he invited us to come over there. There were a bunch of administrative people from the university there, and all these people that had contributed to making this thing happen. And then we went and spoke to the honors class, which was really fun. They're incredibly smart. There's a group of 11 kids, and they're undergrads, really smart kids, and they just asked really great questions, very thoughtful. And they'd all read my book. What was personally really thrilling for me? It was just very cool for me because they were sitting at these long tables, which were like desks in a classroom, with their sort of notebooks. You know how like kids have piles of stuff in front of them, their pens and their notebooks. And in their piles was my book, sort of a well-worn paperback version of my book, and they were all had them there, and because they were actually used as a textbook in the course. It was just so cool for me to see my book being used in that context. That was really exciting. Anyway, and after that class, we went right over to this very beautiful auditorium that they have in the Arts Center there and gave an evening panel in which the four of us presented our presentations, and we only had 20 minutes each, so it was very difficult to keep everything short, but it was very well received, and the audience was great. Very intelligent questions again at the evening event, and then I did a book signing afterwards, and there was just so much positive energy there and enthusiasm for it. So it was a great experience.
Wow. Now, did the press get involved?
The university did not want to go all out and invite the press, which was sort of, they had intended to, but then it turned out they didn't. So there wasn't a lot of press. There was one major radio station that came called WTOP, and they did a online news story. I posted on my Facebook page. You've probably seen that. They did a story about the event, but that was the only press, I think, that was, that covered it.
How were the students in the honors class? How did it seem like they felt about the information in the book?
I think they were very interested. I mean, I sat with some of them at lunch, and they just asked a lot of good questions, and nobody was, not taking it seriously. That's for sure. Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
Yeah, they were it was just part of their learning process, and it was just, it was very cool to see it treated like that, and which is the way it should be. So actually, in one level, wasn't surprising to me because to me that's normal. No, it should be.
Have you had interaction with Miles O'Brien before? It was really exciting to see that he was going to moderate early on, especially given his sighting. Have you ever talked with him before?
Yeah, I have a couple of times. I met him in New York City because he covered, he did a program on CNN. I guess you're probably aware of that. It had 5 parts to it on UFOs, and that's when he announced his sighting. So I've had some contact with him since then, and then he wrote a blurb for my book, so I had some conversations with him then. And we just sort of have loosely kept in touch over the years. And so I was the one that approached him about doing this. And he agreed to do it, but then unfortunately at the last minute had to be called away. So, but the moderator we had, his name is, I'm slipping. It's embarrassing. I should have looked up his name before we did this interview, but he was absolutely fantastic. He is one of the deans at the school, and he's a political scientist, very, very intelligent guy, and he was just terrific as the moderator, so it all worked out.
Leslie, what kind of class was this that studied that, and did you see any other books they were reading too?
I didn't see any of their books, but I think it's a class on like science fiction and alien contact or something like that, is what science fiction / fact, alien contact. I know they've studied a lot of movies about, movies that involve the theme of extraterrestrials, read different kinds of books. So they're sort of looking at the whole genre, the whole world of how the society has approached the whole notion of alien contact. I think that's what they're doing from both a factual perspective and from a science fiction perspective.
I see.
So I think it sounded like a great course. I think the kids really enjoyed it a lot.
Did the professor who puts it on, did he contact you about doing this panel?
Yeah, he contacted me, I'd say about a year ago. I mean, it was a long time in the making, this thing. And he contacted me first, and we talked about, who the other panelists might be, and we just sort of have kept in touch with it as the whole thing evolved. It took a lot of work on his part to make this thing happen. And, the university all had to be organized way in advance. So, yeah, but that's how it all started. He just contacted me to see if I would be willing to
That's cool.
be part of a panel and also help him pull the whole thing off. So,
well, I hope this travels to another university will take the same type of approach. That would be great to see this happen.
I certainly hope so, too. I mean, that's what I was hoping this would be, sort of a green light for other universities to start doing what they've done, but we'll see what happens. I hope it does happen again. And they may want to do it again at American University. They talked about doing something else, especially if he does the course again, if he repeats the course, then he might be able to make this a more repeatable situation. I mean, bringing people in to the university. So we'll see what happens.
Congratulations. I mean, this just speaks to, once again, the power and the impact that, this credible information has. And I think that's what's really great is how much legs, your book has had and what a great impact it's had in the mainstream.
Sure.
Well, thanks a lot. Thank you, Alejandro. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And, that's like the go-to book you hear about. It doesn't seem like you can be anywhere where we're talking about UFOs and the book doesn't come up when someone is talking about it seriously. So, Leslie,
thanks.
Where can someone find your website?
My website is UFOsontherecord.com.
Great.
That's UFOsontherecord.com, and I'm also have a very active Facebook page, which is an open page, so you don't have to be a friend or anything. You can just go there. There's a lot of activity on my Facebook.
Yes, there is. So. I look at it often.
Good. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Good.
And
okay, guys.
We'll be talking to you soon.
All right. See ya.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. So, Alejandro, it's always great talking to her, isn't it?
It is, and I just get so excited. I mean, a lot of people feel like you have to go to the fringe and that's what's most popular. But I don't agree. I think, look at the impact. I think she's an example that that the mainstream institutions aren't interested if you're careful about what you do and you have really good, credible information.
And that's where possibly Tom may have crossed the line a little bit. But hopefully it won't have a negative impact on the whole situation.
Yeah, hopefully it won't. And I was excited because I know Tom has a lot of great, credible research, some incredible witness testimony for Roswell. I mean, I think they make a great argument that something mysterious went on there. And I was hoping he would present that, but we'll see what happens.
Right. So, well, we have other news stories.
That is correct. So some of the other news stories, we did have sighting reports that we've had throughout the week, but none of them that really stood out enough for me to talk about here with you. But one of the kind of interesting stories I think this week is this Russian satellite. So on May 23rd, Russia sent up a rocket with a couple military communication satellites, and something came out of the rocket that everyone thought was space debris. It just floated along, and then it began to maneuver, and it maneuvered to various space objects of the Russians, and then it maneuvered and followed and paced the rocket that it flew up with. So people are wondering what this is. Russia in the past has said if, relations deteriorate with the West, they're going to restart a program they used to have of killer satellites. It was called the IS program, and these were satellites that kill other satellites. And a lot of people are suspecting that that's what this is. And interesting enough, the Chinese recently, also in May, had a satellite that people began to observe was doing unusual movements, and it went and seemingly captured another satellite. People suspect that this is another test of, some kind of military, almost warfare type of activity. So this is getting really kind of scary, and I think it's important for UFO researchers just to know there are more and more military devices up there. We've heard a lot about the Air Force Space Command's unmanned shuttle that has been flying around, and it will go up for months and months on end, flying around up there. It landed recently in California, and they do show it's secret in that we don't know what it's doing. We know it exists. There's videos of it landing and taking off, but we don't know what the heck it's doing up there. So it is getting interesting, and this story that was in the Washington Post quoted a story from 2010 written by Popular Mechanics in which a Russian official had who's in charge of defense and this sort of thing said that they're ready for war in space. His quote was, "There should be no war in space, but we are military people and should be ready. Trust me, we would be able to respond quickly and adequately." And this was translated to mean by the authors of the story that there's more up there, that there are military space vehicles up there of some sort, and that they're ready to have a satellite battle or whatever they're going to do.
This is just going to be it's going to end up being just like nuclear arms eventually. Right. We'll have all this way to destroy each other and, everyone's finger near the trigger but not pushing it. I don't know.
Another kind of the future standoff, where it's our satellite versus your satellite and trying to gain that higher ground.
Who is the woman researcher that was really involved in trying to make sure that the Star Wars program or whatever it was called never went anywhere? Do you know who I mean?
Yeah, I do. That was the woman who worked with Werner von Braun, and I cannot remember. Oh, Carol Rosin.
Okay.
Is that who you're thinking of? Yeah, she does a lot of peace and space sort of work,
right,
trying to make sure that space is not militarized. And technically, legally, I think there are agreements where the space isn't supposed to be militarized, but obviously the larger powers, including, the U.S., kind of ignore that and do whatever the heck they want. So it is, especially in these times where rhetoric between the United States and Russia is getting more bellicose, and seemingly things are okay with us in China at the moment, but of course we are at odds with some of their allies as well. So
yeah, we're sort of Cold War-ish.
It is Cold War-ish. It is kind of a... The waters are getting cooler around this area, and it is to me, it's a bit scary.
So we have one more quick story, right?
Yeah, just another real quick note that this is something that MUFON has launched recently. They are looking to do a new website. And along with that, a new kind of reporting center, which would mean that it's much easier to report and that the database is much easier to access. For instance, I've been using this database to do some statistical work for years. Unfortunately, all I can get is some high-level data pinning down, where triangles are happening when, for instance. It's very difficult to do. But they're going to make that easier now if they are able to put together this interface that they're working on. You can go, it's a Kickstarter the campaign they started. They're hoping to raise $80,000, 78 to be precise, which is a lot of money. It's got about a little less than 2 weeks to go, and they've got about 10,000. So we'll see if they get there. But it's just kind of interesting. If you go to the Kickstarter, we've got a story that Roger Marsh wrote about it today. But if you go to the Kickstarter, you'll see a mock-up of the website they want to have. And it's gorgeous. It's really nice. It's very easy to work with. If you go through reporting a UFO, the experience is it's fun. It's a lot of fun to go through it, and easier to do that sort of thing, whereas now it's a bit daunting.
I think it should be a lot easier. Of course, I've mentioned many times I had no idea you could even report one online, but make it as simple as possible. Always better.
Right. So hopefully they do well, but that's something else that's going on out there in the UFO sphere.
Well, sir, thank you so much for joining us. A pleasure as always.
Ditto, my friend. Talk to you soon.
Okay, so hang in for this quick music break. We'll be right back with A.J. Gervard. Well, everyone, guess what? AJ has not been answering, and I've been trying to Skype him, and this is live radio, and I apologize this is happening, but I always had to think about, when I was doing live radio, to have a plan B, and I've talked to a few people, and they have volunteered to be a pinch hitter, you want to call it, someone to fill in. We can have... one of my good friends that I always enjoy on the show, and I'm going to try to contact him now. I'm going to give up on AJ, unfortunately. If all goes well, I'm going to be connecting to a friend and a past guest, someone that really takes the topic seriously, does a great job, Chris Lambright. We're going to try to connect to him right now. It's ringing. Isn't that good news? And I see people...
Hello.
Hello, Chris. How are you?
Hi, Martin. How are you?
Good. Couldn't get the Skype fired up, huh?
I have two computers. Actually, I have three, but I have both of them. And went into Skype. I even went in and changed my password. That works fine. But on both computers, Skype will not even connect. I mean, just trying to... Again, the microphone headset works, but neither one will sign into Skype. I even tried signing in with Facebook.
Did you?
So I'll fix that later on. But
yeah, did you happen to notice any, men in black around the dooryard?
Yeah, really. No, that was a surprising thing. I told your guy when he called, I said, it's amazing to me. I've used it on both of these sets before, and I can get online. I could even go in and change passwords if I, just to be on the safe side. I can set it up to sign in with Facebook. But when I fire up Skype and type in and hit connect, it says can't connect.
Wow.
So there's something else going on, but I don't know what.
Yeah. Well, you're here, and you're on the phone, and thanks so much for joining us. And, I guess we're not going to be talking about Brazil cases tonight, are we?
I don't know. I was kind of hoping to hear what AJ had to say.
Yeah, and there's no sour grapes here. Something must have happened, and I'll try them on. And if someone wants to jump in the chat room, if you're listening live, it's at podcastufo.com. Real easy sign in, and you can type in a question for Chris Lambright. And if you want to Google the Paul Benowitz case, he knows that case inside and out. Actually, knew Paul. And what would you like to talk about tonight, Chris? We got an hour and a half almost to hour and 20 minutes.
I don't know. The whole thing the subject that seems to come up with me among some of the people that I talk to these days is, the idea of now that we're in much more of the surveillance state, how can you actually accomplish something if there's that risk that anything you try to do is going to be known ahead of time? I mean, I'm not presuming to be paranoid that, everybody's being listened in on, but my feeling is if the subject is as important as it is for those of us who've been at it a while and kind of know where some of the real evidence is, if it's that important, you would presume somebody is monitoring or somebody's watching, what happens. I mean, it's a kind of a crazy situation because even what Leslie was talking about, that she goes to the conference, others go and try to present very credible information in a credible and responsible way. But what gets all the press is somebody comes out and says something that tends to muddy the entire waters. The whole thing of this photograph that was taken, that's what gets put into the articles online, and unfortunately it taints everything. And tomorrow it's no news anymore. So the good articles or the good talks, good information gets lost because the one gee whiz, frivolous, more entertaining seeming aspect of it. And who's to say that that's not one way of suppressing the good information by always throwing a ringer in or something? I don't mean to put anybody down that way, but you see what I'm getting at. I mean,
sure.
You don't hear much about what Leslie had to say or what Halt had to say or some of the others might have had to say, because anybody who runs to post something, any reporter who wants to post something, is going to focus on the one topic that nobody has the evidence and nobody has whatever, and it just deflates everything. So I've wondered after the Paul Benowitz situation about counterintelligence. This is their job, is to make sure that they fend off possible issues. But nowadays, with the idea that anything we say, I mean, I go into Skype and I have to log into Facebook, and immediately it wants to know who all of my contacts are and who all the this sort of thing. So at some point, you have to try to email someone, or you have to try to contact somebody in a way to at least try to get some information across without it being heard by whoever might be listening on the other end.
We've got a question up in the chat room that I'm going to ask in just a second, but I just wanted to tell you, I spoke with someone that was on the phone a few weeks ago that was actually involved in the NSA for a number of years. And it was a real interesting conversation. And he quietly told me, I can't identify who he is, but he quietly told me that what we know, like, for instance, what Snowden released or has released so far, he said is absolutely the tip of the iceberg. And he said, be careful in what you're doing. And he didn't say it in a threatening way, but he was saying it in a way like to warn me, just be careful in what you're doing. And what I gathered from that is that the surveillance that every American has had cast upon them is a lot deeper than we really even realize it is.
Well, and that's the difficult aspect of it, which I was talking to a friend today, and it's that none of us are interested in doing anything illegal. I mean, everybody here is simply interested in something that potentially is crucial, as crucial as Mars expeditions, as anything else that's going on. I mean, the world's becoming a smaller place every day, and we just simply want to know. But for some reason, there seems to be a real concerted effort, and I'm not presuming that the people who are, whoever they might be, the people who do know what's going on and are trying to keep it quiet, that they're not doing it for a good reason. I mean, we might, if we found out what that was, we might understand, why they're trying to do what they're doing. But to feel like you don't even have the chance to find out what you want to find out because somebody is either going to head you off at the path, or somebody's going to make sure that before you get out and talk to that person, or before you take this step, the answer is gone before you get there. I mean, how would it be if you wanted to talk to someone and you knew who they were? I mean, look at it does sound paranoid, and unfortunately that's one of the reasons I think a lot of people dismiss a lot of this. But Edward Snowden went through an entire process. I mean, I read Glenn Greenwald's first, the book on this, No Place to Hide, and it was a huge process that Snowden made him go through before they could even meet. And at first, they didn't, because Greenwald wasn't aware of the security protocols and the methods to go about getting secure text and whatnot. And he missed his first chance because Snowden was obviously paranoid for good reason about it. But that's the thing that gets me the most is, how do you, if you're going to go talk, I mean, how can you get anybody reporting something to you privately?
Right.
If somebody, it used to be, I mean, I've had someone tell me now that really the best thing you might do is show up at the conferences, because nobody's going to email you something, because who knows who's listening. Nobody's going to call you and if you're someone in a position where these people just might try to approach you, if they're going to try, the best chance is for you to simply be at some place close to town where they can just go and meet you in the hallway. Try to do something privately, because nobody's going to be talking or sending emails, messages out. Some of the best cases that are sent, who would you report to? I mean, we all have, our own concerns about some of the reporting groups, but if I was the intelligence community, I'd start a UFO group and make it the best one out there with everyone reporting to me. It's like a false front, because as soon as everyone's reporting to me, the good stuff, is never going to see the light of day, because I'm going to know about it long before it gets out. But the people who know what like the guy you were talking about, who spoke to you, the people who know what can be done, they're not going to do it. They are not going to send you a message, an email, or something open like that, because the people that are listening are going to know who's sending it, and they're good at their jobs. And look what Snowden's gone through to try to tell us something that I think everybody wanted to know, but they're still hanging him out over there.
Yeah.
But anyway, needless to say, it concerns me now with Paul Benowitz, because in a case like that, where at least he called AFOSI, the first thing, and back in those days, it was all mail. I mean, unless no one really used email at the times. And so if they were watching who he was sending mail back and forth to, these days he'd be trying to do everything by internet, by email. And that they would have known immediately. He would have been on their list to monitor, within an hour. So, and I don't know whether any of the rest of us would have heard much more of it or whatnot. But it's easy to get paranoid. But
there's someone stated on the chat room that I've heard it stated that they don't care what you say, write, or do, but they are terminally interested in what you can prove. That's an interesting statement.
See, that's the most valid. In fact, that came up not long ago in another conversation. And in this case, it was once again about Paul Benowitz, that if you or I took a video or film of a UFO, who would care? Because you're not going to be able to prove anything with it. But if, in the case of Paul, he got it over the Manzanos. He had it on film. His wife had been there with him. And he had a good reputation and credibility. He could prove where it came from, and that put whoever was on the other side of the fence, that put them in the hot seat. So it was what he could prove with that. So the films themselves are one thing, and I think that's probably why he got in, the trouble that he got into, was because there was concern that this was a guy that would be believed, and he could back it up with enough evidence and other testimony, to make it credible. But there's the point. If you can't ever get far enough to prove it, because everything's being monitored, it makes their job difficult.
Right. Another question up there. Someone wants to know if you read Exempt from Disclosure by Colin Doty.
Yes, I have a copy of the book. I got it.
Sounds like you really enjoyed it.
I mean, at some point, just to know what's being said. And in fact, I think I referenced some of the confusion that came out of that book. And of course, if I'm not mistaken, I think Doty later went back and said, well, his name shouldn't have been on it, that Robert Collins had put his name on it, although if you read it, there's plenty of information inside that seems to have been written practically firsthand by Doty himself. But I don't buy into it. Too much. Both of those guys, in essence, made their names writing in on the Paul Bennewitz case and then leading everybody off like a Pied Piper off into other things. My understanding is they were both the characters in the shadows on that special that came out years ago. And and if you see some of the things that Robert Collins, I've never met Robert Collins. I want to qualify that. I don't know him. Some of the things the places he supposedly worked at Wright Pat and other things seem to be fairly, higher level. You'd expect him to be a smart guy. But some of the things that I read that he has said and some of the things that he's put out on his mailing list are kind of really out there. They're out there even for someone who's interested in UFOs. But Doty, that's a... the only thing I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say because I don't know personally what these guys did. And Doty, I'm sure his life hasn't been all fun because of his involvement in this. And he was the name who got hung out there basically to draw flies. Everybody that came at this went after Doty. And I don't know what position he was in. But part of me says, in this country, we don't do that kind of thing to somebody like Paul, who was just trying to do the right thing. He thought he was doing the right thing. You don't just mess the guy over completely to where he practically is, destroyed from what everybody, from what I've seen and heard. And it's the same. If you looked at the video Mirage Men, you'll hear Doty make a comment in there where he says Paul was very patriotic. And something to the effect, and people like that are easy to fool or easy to mislead. If I was a veteran, I would be somewhat offended to think,
yes, okay,
so he was a patriot, and we're going to use that against him to lead him down the golden path. And I don't know. I wonder what, I don't know. There are people out there that look like you and me, but they're operating on some other terms of, the moral compass isn't always pointing north, I guess you'd say.
Right. Hey, Chris, I just want to let you know that I'm occasionally going to give A.J. Trevard a try. So
I understand. Please feel free.
No, and then he could just join the both of us. And if he happens to answer, it may be right in the middle of your conversation. So if you hear someone saying...
If he answers, bring him in, and I will drop out because I would much rather hear what he has to say at this point.
Well, you could hear it live. But I have a feeling... it is very late there now. It's pushing midnight their time. So I have a feeling he's probably just fast asleep. And, he may have just forgotten the whole thing.
It happens.
Yeah. But I just wanted to warn you in case that happened. So we got about another 10 minutes, and we're going to be at the top of the hour, and then we have a whole another hour to go. And one of the things about Richard Doty... If I can
I would like to ask, if only I want to make this observation that, I wrote my book about these two characters, the two films, so to speak, the one that Paul Bennewitz took and the one that Ray Stanford took. And the reason I chose those is not just that they were superb films showing what they did, but because both of them indirectly connected back to the Air Force Research Lab. Now, my belief at this point, I guess if I had to make a vote one way or the other, is that whatever Paul Bennewitz filmed, Doty's superiors, whoever was above there running the operation, they knew it was supposed to be there. It was Paul that wasn't, because every bit of trying to be logical about how things came down suggests to me, now I don't know who built them. I mean, whether they were something we built or otherwise, I think they were known to be coming in there those 3 or 4 times that they came in, that Paul happened to see them. Now, what Ray took, I just cannot fathom that, especially based on what I wrote about in the book, that that's anything built here, at least not in this time frame, so to speak. But it seems like most, even though I'm fascinated with Paul Benowitz's case, most of what ufology seems to dwell on are old cases. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm still coming up with some intriguing new information about, and I've got an FYI request in with AFOSI of all things about the Socorro case, because I found serious evidence that they squelched that. They lied to. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was an effort made to not only disinform the Lorenzens from APRO, but the same symbol was used to disinform Hynek. Now, whether he knew it or not, I don't know. But it's not a symbol that's not the one that Zamora told to me. So I'm fascinated with older cases, but, I would think ufology needs to start looking forward and find the new, look at the technology that we have now, especially the types of things that even Douglas Trumbull was talking about potentially doing, that kind of technology. But we've got the technology to get the evidence that could change things. Ray got it on film all those years ago, but I just see ufology seemingly stuck in a loop, and I would love to see people reporting more current day, although what do you report to, right? I think they should call you, Martin. I think you need to set up a reporting site of your own and have people report everything to you. At least have a third independent location to report to. But it's the new things. I mean, we should be talking about current day sightings that are happening that people can sink their teeth into, things that are happening now. It doesn't seem to happen all the time, but I still wonder whether it is happening. We just don't hear about it.
That's true. Well, with the number of sightings people are reporting, which is probably only about 10% of the ones that people are seeing, I mean, if you just do the math alone, you can figure that there is something going on. Anyone who's fascinated with this topic realizes that there is definitely something going on. But again, as I was talking about earlier, the people like you who've been at it for so long, you can get really discouraged, can't you? Just, not getting anywhere, just kind of staying still.
Well, you would be surprised how often a thought goes through my mind that, here we are talking about the same kind of, not you and me, but I'm just saying, it does come up, and maybe we're all like veterans sitting around having a beer, and you end up reliving all the old war stories. But we seem to be talking about the same things we've talked about for 50 years. Mm-hmm. And the same approach and the same way of doing things, beating on the government's door. I mean, that's futile. I mean, if they don't want to tell us, they're not going to, but I guess if they think we'll keep everybody beating on the door, they know where we are. But it strikes me that there are other cases that I think should be. I'll give you an example of one if I can paraphrase what I recall, because I'm not sure if Roger Marsh wrote about this on Examiner, but it was reported to MUFON, a case that seemed fascinating to me about a couple who'd been driving late at night, and they pulled off at some place to rest for a moment. There was a picture of the highway where they were, and both of them apparently saw some unusual thing seem to rush in very quickly and stop right out kind of in front of them, about 100 yards away, possibly lit up by some of the night street lights, just for a moment, and then move away extremely quickly. And you have a husband and his wife both sketched pictures. The pictures had some interesting differences, even among the similarities. But that kind of case, somebody should have gotten up there and talked to them very quickly and interviewed them and gotten more details and tried to match that up with anything else that might have been seen in the same area. But I don't know. Maybe MUFON's doing it, and I'm not hearing about it. But that's why I wish there were other places to report. Because there are independent people. I'm not saying MUFON doesn't have some great people at all. But there are plenty of other independent people who would love to be willing to help at some of these out-of-the-way places if we just, if they knew that these cases were out there. I mean, if nothing else, some of us would have a way to call. In the old days, you pick up the phone and call. Nowadays, if it's reported in MUFON or it's reported to somewhere else and nobody is willing to help you if you call, and we've all had experience with this, calling and saying you're interested in this case, but sorry, they won't give you the time of day or won't give you any information to contact the witnesses, and it makes it difficult because you're right, a lot of the stuff isn't reported. It certainly doesn't hit the newspapers anymore. We don't even have Lou Farish's clipping service to have clippings from newspapers of these sightings where you could hear about them. It's all done digitally and sent by email and whatever else, and makes it difficult. But needless to say, I don't know. Yeah, it is frustrating and it's depressing to some extent when you think there are things that you'd like to do, but how do you go about doing it?
Right. Now, I think in the second hour we'll talk a little bit about this, but we've had a discussion. There's one agency, we were talking about, MUFON, and earlier in the news, Alejandro Rojas was talking about, they're trying to trying to create a new website, making it easier for people to report. But it seems to me that there's a lot of controversy about MUFON. There's people that are really dedicated, that, it's been around forever. People are dedicated that work with them. I know a number of people that work with them that I highly respect. And then there's people that just get really upset talking about them. And I know, I don't know if you really want to talk about it, but I think you've had some frustration with them in the past.
Well, it's funny, and I always want to qualify that I'm only talking out of the experience that I've had. And I think you, in fact, in one of your early podcasts, which was a surprise to me, had interviewed one of the MUFON state directors. I think at the time he was covering a couple of the states up there, and a guy I'd never heard of. But, I was impressed with the guy. I mean, I don't recall his name. I'm sorry that I don't. But I do remember, kind of an unlikely-sounding guy who was running the state section. And I thought, this guy was impressive. He seemed like a very sharp character, not, starry-eyed or anything else, and the kind of guy you would have been able to work with. Now, the problems that I have, which are the same kind of problems that I guess we have in government today, which is everything seems, it's such a pyramid of diminishing levels of responsibility, and that it's like politics. None of us can go easily talk to our senators anymore, and they're all behind their doors making decisions and say they're doing it for us, but we don't really know what goes on at that level. And many of the things are done kind of behind the scenes, and I don't know at this level what exactly is going on at the upper levels of MUFON, because my concern is, look what the NSA, why should they spend the money doing what they're doing now when they can go to Facebook and get everybody's contacts and who's talking to who? They can just go behind the scenes with a piece of paper and get tap-in access to everything that's going on. If I was somebody like that and I wanted to keep tabs on what MUFON is doing, I wouldn't need to plant all my people around the table like back in the old days of NICAP and the CIA. All I'd need to do is have my guy get in there and become the database manager, right? Maybe at the site where they maintain their whole database, their website, because that guy is the one who really has control over what hits their database, what shows up, what doesn't. But at least even the things that you and I can't see, because from my understanding, there are some cases that their STAR team or whoever else is researching, or that they're looking into themselves. So the information isn't necessarily out there for the average person to just see it on their website. But we don't know what's going on. And as you were indicating, my own experience was years ago when I think the Dallas, and I believe I went over this in the book, it was back when Walt Andrus was in charge, and the Dallas group decided to kind of secede from MUFON. My friend Tommy Bland was there, so he can vouch for this. And Ron and Kay West were the ones who were leading the Dallas group at the time, and they had been a part of MUFON. But for a couple of other reasons, and primarily this, they were thinking of seceding because Walt Andrus had been up there meeting with them, and a couple of the guys had written an article about a case that they thought was very important, at least important to them as well, and had sent it to be published in the MUFON Journal. And when they asked Walt about it, from what I was told, what I heard right there, Walt's response was, well, some of the best stuff never gets into the MUFON Journal. And the guys were stunned. And they began to know, what are they paying their dues for? Now, I'm not trying to make a mountain out of a molehill with that, but you see the point. I don't know why Walt would say that to them, but there are plenty of times when you begin to think, so what does the membership know for all their hard work? And this may not necessarily apply just to MUFON. It's not my goal to bash MUFON per se. but this may be the same way that we certainly know it applies in our government, but it may just be that at the top things are happening that down below people are not aware of. And unfortunately, I think we do need transparency, if only because of the whole rigmarole that came around when James Kean was getting some accusations about money being spent. When Bigelow was buying into MUFON, that's my term, buying in, but he was paying them to supposedly train their investigators in exchange for access to their database. And there was a time that if you looked at their site, that there was a comment when you post information or when you submit a report that it would only be handed out to MUFON members and certain third parties. And the point being that, well, that was Bigelow. And Kean was a little bit frustrated with the idea of selling off this information, so to speak, to Bigelow. But it just goes to show, if we had never heard about this, how would we know people and who's behind Bigelow? And why are they getting information that the membership, you would think, would be interested in seeing? You would think you're getting free and clear transparency, but those are the things that, and I'm sure the people at MUFON know this. I'm not telling you something they're not aware of, but I'm not addressing the people down below. It's just that in an organization that's supposed to be an educational organization, they should do everything they can to make sure that their credibility is never called into question.
Absolutely.
And I wish there was a way. This is why I kind of feel I joke when I say you should start a reporting site. Alejandro should do it. Somebody should do it. Because, and even Kurt Collins, you've had him on, posted an interesting point the other day on the UFO updates in which he found that the FAA apparently no longer says if you want to report a UFO sighting, they were no longer referring people to Bigelow Aerospace. Now they just say, well, you can report it to one of any number of sites like the National UFO Reporting Center or MUFON or whatever else. So I don't know whether they did that to just remove Bigelow, from the picture, or whether that's still going on. But my feeling is if things are getting reported to MUFON into their database, and anybody who knows a little bit about how to search online, I've had times where I found some interesting hits on searches that showed to have been in the MUFON database, but if you go look for it, it's not there.
Hey, Chris.
Even the case number. Yes, go ahead.
We're at the top of the hour here, so we're going to be right back if you're listening live. We're coming right back. Before we go, though, Chris, can you give out your website?
Well, the website is XDesk Publishing, altogether, xdeskpublishing.com.
Oh, I got it wrong when I mentioned it earlier. Sorry. Okay, so if you're listening live, we're going to be right back talking with Chris. We're going to talk a little more about MUFON and a whole bunch of other things for the next hour. Well, that's it for the show. If you're listening as a podcast and want to listen to the second part of the show, you can subscribe right now on our website, podcastufo.com, or in the future at getjoyride.com. And if you are a current subscriber or have donated in the past, I will happily send you an MP3 download link. You can check out the links in our show notes for tonight's UFO news. And I want to thank everyone for helping out with the show today. Keith Rowland, producer of the Dark Matter Radio Network, Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse for our music, Peggy Shunning for managing our Facebook page. Remember to like us on Facebook for all the latest UFO and astronomy news. You can check us out live right here next week on the Dark Matter Radio Network and every Wednesday starting at 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And don't forget to jump in the chat room at podcastufo.com. This is Martin Willis reminding you to keep your eyes to the sky.